Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. Dozens of people gathered for a rally in Kenosha, Wisconsin today following the acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse, who killed 2 men and injured a third during unrest in Kenosha last year after the police shooting of Jacob Blake Jr. He's now paralyzed. From member station WUWM, Emily Files has more.
The march around downtown Kenosha was led by Justin Blake. He's the uncle of Jacob Blake, a black man whose wounding at the hands of police set off the protests where Rittenhouse shot 3 people. Blake and the marchers chanted the names of the 2 men Rittenhouse killed, Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber. They said the men would not be forgotten as Rittenhouse goes free. For NPR News, I'm Emily Files in Kenosha.
There were protests across Europe today against new COVID restrictions as the continent is hit by a 5th wave of infections. NPR's Eleanor Beersley reports thousands demonstrated in Austria and Belgium, and there were clashes in the Netherlands against new antivirus measures.
Tens of thousands of protesters, many from far-right groups, marched through Vienna and Linz after the Austrian government announced a nationwide lockdown for 10 days starting Monday. Average daily deaths in Austria have tripled, and hospitals warn that intensive care units are reaching capacity. The Austrian government also plans to make the vaccine mandatory by February, the first European country to do so. In Brussels, thousands turned out for a peaceful march that turned violent when police used water cannons and tear gas on a small group throwing rocks and other projectiles. Despite the protests, most European countries have high vaccination rates and resistance is sporadic. Eleanor Beersley, NPR News.
President Biden's nearly $2 trillion Build Back Better bill is headed to the Senate. Since passage in that chamber is expected to be tough, the White House today spent time trying to convince lawmakers to support it. Centrist Democrats Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are still concerned about the bill's cost and scope. Senate Republicans oppose the plan. White House economic advisor Brian Deese says the bill will help people around the country.
We really do now have a good understanding of where the consensus lies. It lies in lowering costs for American families. It lies in getting more people back to work by actually addressing the barriers that are keeping people from doing so, like childcare. And it lies in making some serious reforms that will restore some fairness to the tax code. We have broad agreement on those provisions.
Speaking there on Fox News, Democrats want the bill passed by the end of the year, but any changes from the Senate means it would have to go back to the House before the president could sign it. Asian markets are trading lower at this hour. The Asia Dow is down about 0.7%. You're listening to NPR News.
Agenda. The Democrats' razor-thin control of the House and Senate has been part of the story, and both parties know it. So now we want to spend some time talking about one of the key factors that could influence control of the House next year, and that is, you guessed it, how the states draw their maps this year. States are supposed to draw their maps based on population changes reported in the latest U.S. Census, but critics say some important battleground states are engaging in a more partisan process known as gerrymandering. So we're going to take a look at Georgia, where the legislature is set to give final approval tomorrow to a map that drastically overhauls congressional districts in Atlanta's northern suburbs and likely gives the GOP another seat. Joining us now to talk about all this is Georgia Public Broadcasting Stephen Fowler. Stephen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
So Georgia is a state that voted for Joe Biden for president and 2 Democratic U.S. senators in the last election, but it's controlled at the state level by Republicans. So how is that playing out in the map making this year?
Well, Georgia currently has 14 U.S. House seats, 8 held by Republicans, 6 by Democrats. 2 of those changed hands in the last few years, and those are the boundaries that shift the most under this new map. The 6th district in Atlanta's northern suburbs now runs more than 80 miles north of the city and includes some very, very conservative areas. Now, the 7th congressional district packs in more Democrats into a majority non-white county next door. That means 2 Democratic incumbents, Representative Lucy McBath and Representative Carolyn Bordeaux, will likely have to run against each other to try and stay in Congress.
Now, this is happening to the fact that I think people who live in the area will know this. Over the last decade, Georgia has grown by more than 1 million people. So who are some of these people, and is that growth reflected in the new redistricting maps?
Well, Michelle, Georgia's now projected to be a majority non-white state pretty soon. More than 10% of the state identifies as Hispanic, the Asian American population has exploded, and hundreds of thousands of black residents have flocked to metro Atlanta in the last 10 years. This congressional map, though, does not add any new majority-minority districts.
So how do they justify that? I mean, how do the people drawing these maps justify that? Or do they even have to justify it?
Well, Georgia and other states used to have to get their maps pre-cleared by the federal government because they had a history of these discriminatory voting laws, and that's no longer the case because of the Shelby versus Holder ruling. So Republicans say they are following the letter and spirit of the law. Democrats, voting rights groups, and others say that that's not necessarily the case. They're not fair and that they aren't adding more representation for diverse voters in the state.
There's been criticism of states around the country that these are just partisan proposals to preserve large uncompetitive advantages for whatever party is in power. In most states, that's the Republicans. In a few states, that's Democrats. But it's just one seat in Georgia. But I have to ask you directly, Stephen, is that the case here? Is this gerrymandering?
Well, these redistricting advocates and Democrats would certainly say so. The congresswoman most affected, Representative Lucy McBath, is a black woman who won re-election by about 10 points. The voters in her new district would have voted for former President Trump by more than 15 points. So when you take all of this into account, the competitive battleground status of Georgia, demographic shifts, the lack of another new district around metro Atlanta, this one seat for Republicans is a big deal. Now, at the state level, Georgia also has the potential to flip to Democratic control at the statewide level, and it has an important U.S. Senate election next year, too. So every little thing matters. And these maps may favor Republicans now, but they might not last through the entire decade until the next census just because of how fast the demographics and politics are changing.
That is Georgia Public Broadcasting Stephen Fowler. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Georgia isn't the only place where gerrymandering is a major political issue. At least 12 states have now completed their remapping process ahead of next year's midterm elections. And while Republican lawmakers dominate the process of redrawing district lines, mainly because they control so many state legislatures, they're not the only ones. Maryland is one of the few states where Democrats have been able to consistently draw district lines in their favor. 30 years ago, the state created a new majority African-American district in Prince George's County, resulting in the election of former U.S. Representative Albert Wynn, who served in the U.S. House from 1993 to 2008. We wanted to talk to him about that process, so he's with us now. Albert Wynn, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So if I remember this correctly, drawing district lines was always something that you were interested in. Was always a part of your kind of political life. If I remember correctly, even as a citizen activist, before you even got into elected office, you proposed a countywide kind of redistricting plan in the county where you live in Prince George's. Some people consider this a fairly arcane issue until it becomes important. How did you know at that early stage of your political life or even your life as a citizen that was important to do?
Well, you're right. It is fairly arcane unless you're interested in politics. And once you become interested in politics and government, it immediately becomes clear that where the lines are drawn determines, in many instances, who represents you. And so it is the essence of politics. It's the first rung, if you will, in terms of just kind of general participatory politics of, where's your community situated?
The county you lived in was in transition, frankly. It was going from a majority white jurisdiction to a jurisdiction with a lot of African American residents. That was not always the easiest, transition, for a lot of reasons. So what was your goal in drawing those maps at the time, or in your participation? Was it to increase minority representation, or what was it?
The objective of the map was to show that you could have a map that met all the constitutional requirements of being, compact, contiguous districts, not splitting communities, and still, if you do the lines well, create additional minority districts for our county council.
Well, now that you are familiar with all of the criticisms, right, of the process, which is that the politicians are picking their voters when it's supposed to be the other way around. Now you've been on both sides of it. I mean, you were a citizen activist at one point, and then you're an elected person, and now you're, out of office again. How about that? I mean, have your feelings changed about it at all?
Oh, absolutely. I think for a lot of reasons, I would prefer that an independent commission draw lines. It would take the politics out of it. And when I say politics, the politics of individual incumbents and their interest, it would still retain all of the constitutional interests, one man, one vote, and that sort of thing. But you would create more purple districts. See, what's happening now is we're creating hard red districts, hard blue districts, then wonder why we don't get compromise in Congress and why we have this gridlock. Well, if you had independent commissioners drawing these lines, you would get, as I said, purple lines where more moderate candidates would emerge, because you would have to appeal not just to Democrats and the most extreme Democrats or the most extreme Republicans, you would have to appeal to folks in the center, moderates, and you get more moderate representation, and they could come to Washington and I think accomplish a lot more.
So before we let you go, some states, as you've pointed out, implement this independent, nonpartisan, or bipartisan council to redraw maps more fairly. But we also know that states often ignore those commissions and draw maps in their favor. Is there an actual remedy to this? Because as we've pointed out, the people who tend to get involved in these kinds of projects are people who have time on their hands, who have a certain kind of expertise, right?
Yeah.
And that just isn't something that most people can get involved in, right? So what would make a difference?
It's in the legislation. The legislation has to say that the final maps will be determined or voted upon by the commission. You can always appoint a commission, say, go do redistricting and hold hearings and all of that, but we have the final vote. But in the most effective situations, you have a commission created statutorily, and that commission has the authority to make the final decision. Their vote is final. I mean, having a commission as a fig leaf really doesn't do anything. It's only when your state or county law says the commission's vote or decision on the lines will be final. That's when it's meaningful. Each community is going to have to do that, either at the county level or at the state level.
That is former Congressman Albert Wynn. He represented Maryland's 4th Congressional District from 1993 to 2008. He's now in private practice. Congressman Wynn, thank you so much for talking with us and sharing your expertise around this.
Enjoyed the conversation.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mini Cooper. In the mood for a feel-good break? Tap to listen now for a selection of stories that celebrate community, togetherness, and the holiday spirit. If you need an extra dose of fun, stop by the Mini Season of Drive year-end event at your local Mini dealer. Go to miniusa.com for details.
There's a giant chicken that looms over a small city in South Georgia. The shape of a giant beak rises above the trees. Fitzgerald, Georgia, population 9,053, set out to construct a chicken that would be the largest topiary in the world.
So right now it just looks like a 64-foot tall skeleton of a chicken. We'll plant the topiary, hopefully, the plants in late February, and it'll take about a year for everything to grow in.
Jim Puckett is mayor of Fitzgerald and owner of Puckett's Place Hometown Diner. He says the chicken weighs 19.5 tons, all solid U.S. steel.
We're about 20 minutes off the interstate, so I need a billboard out there that says, hey, this way, world's largest topiary chicken. And you might drive by it once, but I don't think you'll drive by that twice. So I say, hey, it's only 20 minutes, let's go check this out.
The topiary chicken has been Jim Puckett's passion project. As mayor, he steered at least $300,000 raised via a special local sales tax into the topiary. It's not just chicken feed. I'm sorry, but you just can't expect us to get through this story without a foul pun or two, or a reference to B.J. Liederman, who writes our theme music. Seems that wild chickens were released near Fitzgerald decades ago. You know what can can happen to chickens on farms, don't you? So they flock to the city.
These wild Burmese chickens ended up migrating to Fitzgerald and have made their home here. So much so that you go downtown to Main Street, pull up at a red light, and you're very likely to see a family of chickens cross in front of you.
But why did the chicken cross never mind. Mayor Puckett really wanted tourists to cross the road and stay a night at the B&B inside the giant chicken topiary. Voters did not share his vision.
My name is Jason Holt. I have been elected mayor of the city of Fitzgerald and take office January 10th.
The incoming mayor says this month's election turned out to be a giant chicken referendum.
There was a lot of animosity, not the right word, but the community was not happy that funds were spent on it.
But what will Mayor Holt now do with the nearly 20-ton steel chicken that rises above the town cityscape?
In the words of the home remodeling at this point, he has good bones. The structure is there.
And it is Fitzgerald's own.
We're kind of too far into it to tear it down and bury the ashes, although there is a faction in the community that wants to do that. But then you really have wasted $300,000. So we've got to come together and try to decide what we want it to be going forward.
Jason Holt envisions an art installation where students from local colleges can freshen up the bird every few years. What does outgoing Mayor Jim Puckett say to those who voted him out over the gargantuan chicken?
I want to shake them and say, hey, we've been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal twice in 4 years because of this silly chicken. I'm doing an interview with NPR right now because of this silly chicken. It's doing exactly what we want it to do.
He sees the town wire chicken as his legacy. Says someone told him,
there's a lot of people that want to leave their mark on the town. He said, you darn sure did that. Nobody can take that away from you ever.
To paraphrase the bard, at the barnyard, Fitzgerald chicken doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty people peep.
Millions of people have also been voting today in Chile. They are selecting a new president in what's widely seen as the most polarized election in decades in that South American nation. The frontrunners include a far-right populist and a young leftist former student leader. To learn more, we're joined now by NPR's Philip Reeves, who's in Chile's capital, Santiago. Philip, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So could you just first bring us up to date? How has Election Day been going so far in Chile?
Oh, it's been a beautiful spring day in Santiago. Blue sky, no clouds. I traveled around polling stations and saw very long lines of people standing patiently, anxiously, and largely silently under the sun. Chileans don't usually turn out for elections in massive numbers, but people told me they've never seen lines like this. Now, whether this is COVID because of COVID restrictions slowing up the process, or whether there really was a big turnout, we don't yet know. But the lines went on all day, and when the polling stations closed, there were some angry exchanges between officials and groups of people who'd been unable to cast their vote in time.
Now, you've been telling us of what a polarized election this has been. Why is this such a divisive election for the country?
Yeah, I mean, I should say we don't know the outcome yet. There are 7 candidates, but very early results point to 2 frontrunners. Jose Antonio Cast, a far-right populist who's been compared with Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, and until pretty recently he was a fringe candidate. And the other is Gabriel Boric, who's just 35 and made his name as the leader of student protests a decade ago. Boric leads a broad coalition on the left that's allied to the Communist Party. Now, if no candidate gets above 50%, we'll have a runoff next month, and that could be between Cast and Boric. Now, I met Mateos Contreras waiting in line to vote, and he's a dentist. And the idea that Chile will face a stark choice between hard right and the left worries him.
I don't think that's going to be possible to have a country in peace. Whether it's left or right, I don't think that it's going to be a happy ending.
And that's a view I heard from a number of voters today.
Now, Philip, I think many people will remember that Chileans suffered horribly during the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet, which ended in 1990. Thousands of people were disappeared, meaning they were abducted and murdered for their opposition to the dictatorship. So how is it that someone from the far right can be a leading contender for the presidency?
Well, that's a particularly sensitive issue in this election. Cast's opponents have been hammering him over his record of expressing sympathy for aspects of the Pinochet dictatorship. But, you know, these have been turbulent times in Chile. 2 years ago, Chile was plunged into chaos by mass anti-government protests that led to the election of a People's Assembly that's now rewriting the Constitution. And the economy, of course, like so many places, has been battered by the pandemic. Added together, that's made conservative Chileans feel insecure, and the far right plays on that fear, just as it does elsewhere, by portraying its opponents as dangerous communists, promising a return to traditional family values. I spoke to CAS supporters who talked about how that matters to them. This is Maria Angelica Laretas, who's 65.
Para mí, José Antonio Cas es una esperanza.
She says it, to her, CAS represents hope. That's why she wants to vote for him.
So when will we know who's won?
Well, they count quickly here, and so we should know in the coming hours.
That is NPR's Philip Reeves speaking to us from Santiago, Chile. Philip, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Millions of Americans are on the move this weekend as the country prepares for yet another holiday season marked by the coronavirus pandemic. And this is while cases are going up once again in some parts of the country. So we're going to be taking a look at some of the latest information we have on the pandemic, including the latest decision by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to allow all Americans aged 18 and older to receive COVID vaccine booster shots. For that, we're joined by Dr. Francis Collins, the director of the National Institutes of Health and one of President Biden's key advisors on the pandemic. Dr. Collins, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Glad to be with you, Michelle.
As we just said, all adult Americans are now eligible for a COVID booster shot. How are you hoping this will help, especially as we approach not just the holidays, but the colder winter months?
Well, that is obviously something that I hope people will look at carefully. And if you're over 18 and you haven't yet gotten a booster, and you're 6 months away from your initial immunization, if you got Pfizer or Moderna, or just 2 months away if you got J&J, this is a great moment to beef up that immunization so that you're less at risk. And a lot of people are doing that. I think what happened on Friday was clarification about exactly who is eligible for boosters, and now they're recommended for everybody 18 and up. So there's no more of this, well, is it about me or not? Yeah, it's about you if you're an adult. The other thing, of course, Michelle, is those 60 million people who haven't even gotten their first dose. If you waited to sort of see whether it was necessary, hey, it's necessary. Don't wait any longer.
So with that high number of unvaccinated Americans in mind, what's the bigger strategy here in terms of containing the spread of this virus? I mean, is this a situation where people like yourself who are working in public health are thinking we're just going to have to learn to live with this long term somehow?
Well, I wish it weren't that way. It's clear that our inability to somehow convince people that this is something they want for themselves, those 60 million people, is presenting a real challenge in terms of how to end this pandemic. I guess I thought, Michelle, a few months ago when it became so clear that this pandemic was still going on and the terrible, tragic toll it's taking is almost entirely on the shoulders of the unvaccinated people, that would really cause people who'd been waiting and been perhaps fearful about a lot of the misinformation that was out there to say, well, wait a minute, look what's happening here. And I'm still hopeful that that's maybe possible.
But is hope a strategy, though? I mean, what is the thinking about that particular group?
Well, we continue to try to persuade, but the other thing, of course, Michelle, that is now happening is the mandates. And I think that has caused people who were resistant to look at the situation and go, well, okay, what the heck? If it's really going to be required, and I don't have to be the person to make the decision and then have to explain it to my otherwise resistant friends, then sure. I think that is going to give us a big jump forward in terms of getting a lot of those who are still not vaccinated onto the list of those who are now better protected.
As we said at the beginning, millions of Americans are going to be traveling this week and in the weeks ahead for the winter holidays. Last winter was the deadliest point in the pandemic for Americans. And so new factors this year, vaccines, boosters, which we've been talking about, but then also there's this Delta variant that has caused, so much sort of pain and suffering. What's your advice to people for this holiday season? What are some of the precautions you think that people should be taking?
Well, first of all, be vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, I think traveling is a considerable risk. For those who are vaccinated, if you're gathering indoors, make sure you're gathering with other people who are also vaccinated.
But what you said at the beginning, Michelle, is true. We also should recognize we're in a better place than we were a year ago. Now it is going to be possible for those who are vaccinated to be able to have family gatherings at Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm hoping to have mine later this week.
Well, I hope it's a wonderful occasion. You recently announced that you'll be stepping down as NIH director soon. And I just wanted to ask you, along with saying, thank you for these years of service, what's still worrying you most about our nation's health, looking at all of the things that you've thought about and addressed in your years in this role?
Well, it's been a complete privilege to have a chance to serve in this role for 12 years. And certainly looking at the COVID situation, I'm amazed at what science has been able to do to respond to this. But I'm still worried about where we are. And frankly, Michelle, the thing that worries me most is the way in which misinformation and frankly disinformation has become so prominent in the face of a public health crisis, and that it's been manipulated in some situations for political reasons in a fashion that is turning our culture wars into something really serious. We probably lost 100,000 people to COVID-19 who were unvaccinated because they had information that told them that this wasn't something that would be safe for them. And that's heartbreaking. And it is kind of a breakdown, it seems to me, in our society of the ability to distinguish opinions from truth. And if we've lost that ability, if we can't sort through the evidence and understand what's real and true, then I worry about all kinds of other challenges that lie ahead for us.
So misinformation is the deadliest disease at this point?
It is. And I think those who are intentionally spreading this kind of information that they know to be false for some political or personal reasons, I really think they are the ones that we ought to be trying to track down and figure out, why are you doing this? And isn't there some kind of justice for this kind of action? Isn't this like yelling fire in a crowded theater? Are you really allowed to do that without some consequences?
That was Dr. Francis Collins, Director of the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Collins, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Glad to talk to you, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Kelsey from North Dakota. I am currently hiking up the Little Muddy River to find a geocache that hasn't been found since 2009. You're listening to the NPR Politics Podcast, which was recorded at...
It is 1:44 Eastern on Wednesday, November 10th.
Things may have changed by the time you hear this. As for me, I will have found this geocache and off to my next geocaching adventure. Enjoy the show!
What's a geocache?
They're like things, little like things that are hidden, and you get the, I think I have this right, you get like the GPS location, you have to go hike and find it, and you like take a picture with it, or there's a prize inside. But they're all around you, Mara. You just don't know.
We just got a new hobby for Mara.
Oh, it's like a scavenger hunt.
Exactly. Hey there, it's the NPR Politics Podcast. I'm Scott Detrow. I cover the White House.
I'm Miles Parks, and I cover voting.
I'm Mara Liasson, national political correspondent.
And future geocacher, maybe.
Yes.
So, we are here. Miles, you cover this every day. Mara, you've been doing a lot of big picture reporting on it. Today we are going to check in on one of the biggest ongoing stories we're all following. Those are attempts to undermine and discredit, and in many states put new restrictions on the elections that are at the heart of this country's democracy. Democrats have been sounding the alarm loudly about the fact that they think this country is in a constitutional crisis.
One of our great political parties has embraced the idea that our last election was fraudulent, that our current president is illegitimate, that they must move legislatures across the country to fix the results of future elections.
That is Maine Senator Angus King. He's an independent who caucuses with the Democrats. He was speaking on the Senate floor a few weeks ago. Mara, you just put a big story on the air about all of this. What are the specific worries that King and so many other people have about what could happen in the next two elections, specifically 2024?
Yeah, well, there's a whole kind of cascading list of things they're worried about. I mean, one of them is that there'll be tremendous voter suppression, people will be purged from the voter rolls, but then the real worry is that there'll be election subversion, meaning that Republicans have passed laws in these states that allow Republican state legislatures to basically put their thumb on the scale of a close election and make it so Republicans can't lose a close election. Partisan political actors would be put in the right jobs where they could decertify ballots, and ultimately the state legislatures based on their role that the Constitution gives them, get to choose electors, and that they could send to Congress electors in favor of the Republican candidate, regardless of what happened to the vote in their state. And at that moment, assuming there's a Republican House of Representatives, Speaker Kevin McCarthy or whoever it would simply certify the Electoral College results for the Republican candidate. It would all be perfectly legal, but it would be the end of American democracy.
These are things that a few key people in a few key places stopped from happening last time around, but a lot of those people's moods have shifted, and a lot of those people have been replaced by people who seem much more willing to do this next time around.
Right, and remember, this is exactly what Donald Trump asked election officials in key states like Georgia or Arizona to do. He asked them to send alternative slates of electors to Congress so that he could overturn the results of an election that at least 62 judges had determined to be fair and free of fraud.
I thought it was really interesting, too. Reuters did an analysis a few weeks ago that looked at the Republican candidates in 5 battleground states who were running for the office of Secretary of State, and 10 of the 15 Republican candidates at this point for those offices in those states have voiced sympathy for the idea that the 2020 election was stolen. So there will be a lot of Republicans on the ticket in 2022 and 2024 who have made it very clear that they would be open to overturning an election.
Miles, what are the specific things? I mean, you have spent so much time talking to, interviewing, getting to know, county election administrators, statewide election administrators. What are the things that they're most worried about right now?
The only reason that all of these fears exist, the fears that Mara just kind of laid out, are because Republican voters, the majority of Republican voters, believe the lie that Donald Trump should be the rightful president. And so I think election officials, when they're looking ahead at 2022 and 2024, how can we fight back against that? It comes back to education, it comes back to communication with voters, because the only way that any of those scenarios work is if a majority of Republican voters do believe that stuff, or otherwise politicians aren't able to behave that way.
Well, not only do a majority of Republican voters believe that stuff, Donald Trump on a daily basis is putting out the message that his election was stolen from him, which is not just something that undermines faith in democracy, because the sanctity of the ballot is the core value of a democracy, but also it's tactical. If you think the last election was stolen from your guy, then that pretty much makes it legitimate to do anything necessary to win the next time, including stealing back the election. Donald Trump just spoke to a big group of House Republicans. This was on Monday night. He now has a new formulation about that insurrection. It's no longer a false flag attempt by Antifa. He says the insurrection happened on November 3rd, the false election, the fraudulent election. But January 6th, those events were justified. They were just a protest. So this is a big effort by Donald Trump, who is the leader of the Republican Party, who spoke in front of a group of Republican House members, and their message, their basic core message for 2022 and 2024 is that the election of 2020 was stolen from Donald Trump. Completely false.
Just a fact check around that, which we need to do, even though I think it's very clear to most of our listeners, January 6th was, of course, a violent and deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol aimed at trying to stop the certification of the presidential election. So, we have established this baseline of real and legitimate worries about what's coming down the line. Mara, you said so many Democrats see this as an existential problem, as an existential crisis, and yet there are very little tools for them to do anything about it. On one hand, a lot of these things are happening in state legislatures completely controlled by the Republicans, and Mara, on the other hand, yet again talking about this because it's such a key storyline, Democrats do not seem to be willing to change any Senate rules to pass any federal laws dealing with this.
Yeah, this is the real problem for Democrats. Because they didn't make any gains in state legislatures in 2020, they lost seats in the House of Representatives, and they only got a 50-50 Senate. They just don't have the votes on any level to pass the kind of federal legislation that would protect elections. One thing they could do is carve out an exemption to the filibuster to pass any number of these voting rights bills with 50 votes only. But as long as Joe Manchin doesn't want to carve out an exemption to the filibuster for constitutional issues, just like exemptions to the filibuster have been carved out in the past for budget bills and Supreme Court nominees and other nominees. That's not going to happen. So Democrats don't have the votes. They are challenging these things in court. They're trying to contest these elections for positions like Secretary of State or County Clerk or State Legislature. But there's not that much they can do because they don't have the votes. And all this is being done legally.
Before we take a break, Miles, I want to ask you one more thing about something you said a few minutes ago. You talked about local election officials saying really just kind of information and education is the best counter. I mean, how optimistic or pessimistic are the people you talk to that can actually happen?
I wish I could tell you that there was a lot of optimism that things are going to be different going forward, but I do think that there is a lot of political science research that points to this idea that what candidates say has the biggest kind of effect on how voters feel about how an election went. And so, no, I don't think there's a terrible amount of optimism from county election officials that they are going to be able to fight a megaphone from a national political candidate. But I think they're also in this position of like, what else can we do?
All right, a lot more to talk about. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey, my name is Peter Sagal, and I'm here to help you with the most pressing problem facing civilization today. There are too many good podcasts to listen to. Now, why not avoid that whole problem by listening to an extremely silly podcast hosted by me? On Wait, Don't Tell Me, it's wisecracks about the week's news, shenanigans, fart jokes, and general silliness. And doesn't that sound pretty great right now? Listen to the...
Fuck up.
died for somebody's sins, but not mine. Million like thieves, wild cord in my sleeve, thick heart of stone. My sins, my own, they belong to me. People say beware, but I don't care. The words are just rules and regulations to me. I'm walking a road built a tower tumbling to the trees. Unholy rattlesnakes, they fell all around your feet. And your mom would stick a fork right into Daddy's shoulder, and Dad would throw the garbage all across the floor, as we would lay and learn what each other's bodies were for. This is the room one afternoon I knew I could love you, and from above you I sank into your soul, into a secret place where no one dares to go. notches in your spine. And when all is breaking, everything that you could keep inside, now your eyes ain't moving now. They just lay there in their prime. Two-headed boy with pulleys and waves, creating a radio blade just for two in the parlor with a moon across her face. And through the music he sweetly displays silver speakers that sparkle all day, made for his lover who's floating and choking with her hands across her face. And in the dark we will take off our clothes and they'll be placing fingers through the notches in your spine. And when all is breaking, everything that you could keep inside, now your eyes ain't moving now. They just lay there in their prime. Two-headed boy, there's no reason to grieve. The world that you need is wrapped in gold, silver sleeves left beneath Christmas trees in the snow. But I will take you and leave you alone, watching spirals of white